I knew something was wrong the moment my son slid that neat blue folder across my kitchen table and said, too softly, "Sign it, Mom. It's just for medical papers." People don't lower their voices unless they're hiding something. And my Gavin. He only spoke that gently when he wanted something he had no right to ask for. The folder stopped near my teacup, the steam rising as if trying to warn me away. I was still in my house dress, the one with faded yellow flowers. My hands smelled faintly of dish soap, ordinary things, safe things. But this folder, no, it didn't belong in an ordinary morning. I pushed my glasses up the bridge of my nose and opened it. The first page had a title, but printed so faintly it looked like someone had tried to erase it. The next pages were copies, all black and white, with long paragraphs that wrapped around like they were trying to hide their true meaning in their own tales. I'd seen enough papers in my life to know when something was being concealed. My husband, God rest him, used to say, "Millie, anything worth signing can be read without squinting." But here I was, squinting. Gavin stood by the fridge, pretending to check expiry dates on things he never cared about. He wasn't even looking at me. That told me more than any of the pages in that folder. "What's this for?" I asked quietly. He sighed, the kind of sigh that says, "Please don't start, Mom. It's routine, medical updates, insurance stuff. You're not getting any younger and they like everything current." "They," I repeated. "Who's they?" "Just programs, benefits." He waved his hand like he was shooing away a fly. "It's all to make things easier for you." "For me?" People love saying things are for you when they're anything but. There were 4 signature lines at the end. 4. For medical papers. I ran my finger over the spaces meant for my name. My hand didn't tremble, not then. I've always been steady when the moment called for it. But my breath did catch, just a little, when I reached the last page and realized someone had folded the corner down on purpose as if to draw my eye away from the paragraph above it. "You didn't read it?" I asked. "No need," he said too fast. "It's standard. Everyone signs these now." I closed the folder. Not gently. "You know," I said, "when your father brought papers home, he always sat down and read them with me line by line." Gavin finally turned. His jaw tightened. "Mom, can we not do this? I don't have all day." I looked at him then. Really looked. The creases around his mouth that came from displeasure, not laughter. The impatience in his fingers tapping against the fridge door. The way he kept his coat on, as if ready to run before I could ask anything he didn't want to answer. "Why today?" I asked. He shrugged. "Timing, deadlines. Things need to be updated. Please, just sign it." There was no softness in his eyes, no concern, no warmth. And that, more than the folder or the faint titles or the 4 signature lines, made something inside me go still, like a pond freezing over. I didn't argue. Didn't ask anything else. At 74, you learn that silence is its own kind of answer. I simply placed the folder back where he'd put it, pushed it gently across the table toward him, and folded my hands. "I'll think about it," I said. He blinked, surprised. My son expects me to agree quickly, quietly, gratefully. He forgets I wasn't born old. "You don't need to think." "I'll think," I repeated, and that was the end of it. His mouth tightened, but he nodded. Took the folder. Left without finishing the tea I'd made for him. The door closed harder than it needed to. When the house grew still again, I sat alone at the table. The steam from my cup had faded. The chair he'd sat in still held the shape of someone who had already made decisions about my life without asking if I wanted any part in them. I knew then, this wasn't over. Not by a long mile. The morning after Gavin brought those papers, I moved slower than usual. Not because of age, though my knees did their usual complaining, but because the house felt different, as if it were listening, as if it too had heard something it didn't like. I made my way through the kitchen, touching surfaces out of habit. The counter nicked from years of chopping onions. The cupboard door my husband once mended with 2 long screws. I know every inch of this place. I've cleaned it, repaired it, protected it. And yet yesterday, for the first time, the house felt like it wasn't entirely mine anymore. Strange how a single folder can do that. I opened the back door and stepped onto the porch. The air was cool, carrying the smell of damp earth. Mrs. Calder's old beagle barked across the yard, the same bark he's had for as long as I can remember, more wheeze than sound. I raised a hand to her. She waved back, her movements slow, careful. "You're up early," she called. "A bad night's sleep," I said. She didn't pry. That's something about old women. We don't interrogate each other's pain. We recognize it by the way someone stands, the way someone holds a mug, the pauses between words. We just nod and let the person keep their dignity. I shuffled back inside, made myself oatmeal, and ate half of it before stopping. My eyes kept drifting to the spot on the table where the folder had rested. It was clean now, wiped down, but I could still see it there. That neat blue cover, those pages pretending to be harmless. When my husband was alive, he handled papers. I handled everything else. But after he died, I learned to read contracts well enough. I had to. Funeral homes love to slip in fees. Doctors love disclaimers. Insurance companies love small print. And I've lived long enough to know when someone says, "Don't worry about the details," you start worrying. By 10 o'clock, I'd cleaned the kitchen twice, watered the 2 plants that didn't need watering, and reorganized the same drawer 3 times. Old nerves return in strange forms. Finally, I sat down, pulled the teapot closer, and admitted to myself what was really gnawing at me. It wasn't the papers, not truly. It was how easily my son had expected me to sign. I raised that boy. I carried him when he was feverish, sat through his sulking years when he slammed every door in the house. I worked double shifts when his father got sick, just so he could have the shoes he wanted, the ones with that ridiculous logo. I never once asked for anything back, not even gratitude. Parents don't, not really. But yesterday, something ugly flashed behind his eyes. Impatience, yes, but more than that, ownership. As if my life were something he'd already counted, arranged, planned. I didn't want to think that. Mothers always try to think better of their children, even when all evidence points elsewhere. A soft knock sounded on the door. I froze. For a moment I thought it was Gavin, back again, folder in hand, ready to push harder. But when I opened the door, it was only the mailman, a thin bundle of envelopes in hand. "Morning, Ms. Whitcomb," he said. "Morning," I replied. 2 bills, 1 charity flyer, and an envelope addressed in a machine font I didn't recognize. I set it aside. These days, anything that asks me to act now goes straight to the bin. The rest of the day passed the way days do when you're 74 and unsettled, slowly, quietly, with your own thoughts chasing each other like children you're too tired to stop. Around noon, I went to the living room, lowered myself into the armchair I've had since long before Gavin left home, and watched dust float in a sunbeam. It reminded me of Sundays with my husband. He'd read the paper. I'd knit something pointless, and the house felt full even in silence. Funny how silence changes when you're alone. My eyes drifted to the framed photograph of my daughter, the one I lost too young. Her boy, my grandson, looks so much like her. Maybe that's why he visits. Maybe he sees something familiar in me. Or maybe he just has a kind heart. Not everyone does. You learn that after 70. As the afternoon dipped into evening, my mind circled back again and again to the folder. The faint print, the multiple signature lines, the rushed explanations. A thought crept in, uncomfortable, unwelcome, but persistent. If those papers were harmless, why did my son avoid meeting my eyes? The kettle clicked off, steam fogging the small kitchen window. I poured myself tea, held the warm cup between my palms, and tried to steady my breathing. Nothing about yesterday was normal, and nothing in that folder was for my benefit. Not really. I didn't know what I would do next. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I wasn't signing a single page I didn't understand. Not this time, not for anyone. I didn't plan on seeing them that day. I truly didn't. But around 3 p.m, the phone rang, and my son's wife, Kendra, chirped into the receiver with that bright, brittle tone she uses when she's already decided things for everyone. "Mildred, darling, we're in the neighborhood. Thought we'd stop by. 10 minutes?" Not a question, a warning. Before I could answer, she added, "Gavin has the papers again. Oh, don't frown, it's nothing dramatic. And it'll be easier if we all sit down together." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. She hung up before I could. I stood in my kitchen for a full minute, hand still hovering over the receiver. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. I straightened a dish towel that wasn't crooked. Then I put the kettle on because I needed to do something with my hands. They arrived earlier than 10 minutes. Of course they did. Their car pulled up as if the driveway belonged to them. Gavin got out first, looking tired of everything, especially me. Kendra followed, adjusting her hair in the reflection of my window before knocking. She always knocks like she's calling a dog. Light, fast, impatient. I opened the door, and her perfume washed over me. Something citrusy and expensive that clashed with my house's old wood and lavender cleaner. "Mildred," she said, stepping inside before I invited her. "You look wonderful. Are those new slippers?" "No," I said. "Oh." She blinked, the way she does when someone fails to play along. Gavin came in slower, eyes cast around my kitchen as if inspecting structural faults. The blue folder was under his arm again, slightly thicker this time. I noticed. I notice everything now. "Mom," he said, nodding. He didn't call me Mom yesterday. Yesterday, I was just someone who needed to hurry up and sign. I gestured toward the table. "Sit." They didn't sit. Instead, Kendra marched straight to the spot where I'd placed a plate of oatmeal cookies, the ones she always pretends to like. "Oh, sweets, lovely," she said, taking one and holding it like a prop. Gavin pulled out a chair, but remained standing, fingertips pressing the back of it. "Mom, let's just clear this up. You worried too much yesterday." "I didn't worry," I replied. "I read." Kendra laughed. Loud, careless. "Mildred, come on. You're overthinking. It's normal paperwork." Everyone deals with this when parents get older. Older, the way she said it, as if it were a diagnosis. Gavin opened the folder and turned it toward me. "Here. See? Same thing as before, just updated." But it wasn't the same, not even close. The margins were narrower, the paragraphs denser, and this time there were tabs, little yellow flags marking where they wanted me to sign. 6 of them now. Yesterday, there were 4. Kendra circled the table, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. She always touches me when she wants control. "It's all about making things easier for you, Mildred. If anything happens, God forbid, We'll be able to handle medical decisions, insurance, the house." "The house?" I repeated. She blinked. Too fast. "Well, yes, temporarily. Just until you're settled. If you needed more help at some point." "I'm not unsettled," I said. "No, of course not," she rushed. "We're just preparing." Preparing. That word slid into the room like a cold draft. I turned a page in the folder. The print was small enough to make my eyes ache. Something about temporary transfer of property oversight in the event of diminished capacity. That phrase, diminished capacity, made something deep in me clench. My voice stayed quiet. It always does. "Did either of you read this?" "It's standard," Gavin said. "Standard for what?" He exhaled sharply. "Mom, you don't need to make this difficult." There it was, the impatience, the edge behind his tone. As if my caution was an inconvenience. As if my life were an administrative form he needed filed by 5 o'clock. Kendra glanced at him, then leaned closer to me. Her smile was soft, like a nurse trying to coax a confused patient. "We just want to help. Your health hasn't been perfect lately, and these decisions, they're complicated. But you trust us, don't you?" Trust. The word felt foreign in my own kitchen. "I trust what I can read," I said. I pushed the folder slightly away. Just an inch, but you'd think I had thrown it. Gavin's jaw tightened. "Mom, sign it. Please." And I saw it clearly. The shift behind his eyes. Not worry, not care. Urgency. Pressure. Something he needed from me that he didn't want to explain. Kendra stepped back, folding her arms. Her sweetness slipped, just a little. "If you won't sign, Gavin can't finalize the arrangements. We're trying to ensure you're comfortable." "Comfortable," I repeated. "Where?" Silence. Not long, but long enough. Gavin stared at the table. Kendra looked at the ceiling. My heartbeat slowed in that strange way it does when you recognize a truth before anyone says it. I stood. "I'll review this," I said calmly. "Alone." Kendra laughed again, but it wasn't laughter anymore. It was disbelief. "You can't understand those kinds of documents without help." "I understand more than you think." They exchanged a glance, a silent argument, a flicker of something sharp between them. Then Gavin snapped the folder shut. Too hard. "Fine. We'll come back tomorrow." They left as abruptly as they'd arrived, their footsteps echoing down my porch steps like a retreating verdict. When their car finally backed out of my driveway, I sat at the table again. The indentation where the folder had rested was still visible in the tablecloth. I laid my palm over it. Cold. Flat. Warning me. Whatever they wanted from me, it wasn't kindness, and it wasn't for my comfort. I didn't sleep well that night. My mind kept circling the same thought, steady and cold. If they were so determined to get my signature, the papers weren't for my benefit. And if they weren't for my benefit, then someone else stood to gain quite a lot. By morning, I had made myself a promise. A small one, whispered into the steam of my teacup. I will not be tricked in my own old age. I may bend, but I do not break. Still, promises don't settle paperwork, and there was something I needed to check. I dressed slowly, choosing the warmer cardigan, the one my husband used to say made me look sturdier than I feel. My knees were stiff, but my purpose wasn't. I took my purse, locked the door, and walked to the bus stop. The cold air cleared my thoughts more than any night's rest could. The bank was 3 stops away, a plain little building with tired windows and a flag that never quite caught the wind. I had been going there for more than 40 years. They'd seen me deposit my first paycheck, and my husband's last. Inside, the air smelled of paper, toner, and old carpet. A young receptionist smiled at me, too politely, the way young people smile when they're not sure if you'll understand things. "Good morning," I said. "I need to speak to someone about my accounts, my regular clerk, if possible." Her eyes brightened slightly with recognition. "Of course, Ms. Whitcomb. Let me see if Mr. Daly is available." He was. He always is. A quiet man with a square jaw and that odd combination of confidence and caution you find only in people who've handled other people's money for too long. He stood when he saw me. "Good to see you. Please, have a seat. What can I help you with?" I sat, smoothing my cardigan. "I have a simple question. I'd like to know if there are any automatic transactions coming out of my accounts that I did not set up myself." Mr. Daly's eyebrows lifted slightly, not in surprise, more in curiosity. "All right, let me check." He typed for a while, the screen reflecting in his glasses. I watched his expression shift, subtly. But I've lived long enough to notice the small things. "Ms. Whitcomb," he said, clearing his throat. "There are 4 recurring authorizations connected to your checking account. They've been active for 19 months. 19? I repeated. Months? Yes. Set up through digital signatures." I stared at him. "Digital signatures? I don't use digital signatures. I can barely open my own email." He removed his glasses, folded them carefully, a gesture that made my stomach tighten. "I understand. But they're listed as approved under your name. What kind of transactions?" He turned the monitor slightly toward me. "2 monthly transfers to a joint account belonging to your son, Gavin. 1 quarterly payment to a medical insurance provider listed under his home address, and 1 ongoing authorization for a supplemental care management service." "Supplemental what?" "It's a third-party service used for coordinating care for older adults, often associated with long-term planning facilities." The room tilted slightly. Not much, but enough to make the carpet ripple under my gaze. "Are you saying," I asked slowly, "that my son has been receiving money from my account every month without me knowing?" Mr. Daly hesitated. That was my answer. "Ms. Whitcomb," he said gently, "I cannot speak to intent, but the authorizations are active and substantial." "How substantial?" He named a number. My breath stopped, not from the amount, though that alone was enough to make my heart squeeze, but from the realization that came with it. They hadn't just brought me papers to sign. They'd been treating my life as their resource for a long time already. I folded my hands in my lap. They looked older than usual, maybe because they were shaking. "Can I revoke these authorizations?" I asked. "Of course. You have full control. But you'll need to sign a cancellation form here at the branch." He handed me a pen. A simple black pen. But it felt strangely heavy. "Ms. Whitcomb," he added quietly, "if I may, it's wise of you to review these things. Many people your age don't." I looked at him, not offended, just tired. I haven't lived 74 years to start being careless now. I signed slowly, making each stroke deliberate. Revoked. Canceled. Mine again. When it was done, Mr. Daly printed a confirmation sheet. I folded it neatly into my purse, as if it were something fragile. Walking back to the bus stop, I felt cold despite the sun. My house, my savings, my decisions, all of them had been quietly slipping into someone else's hands. My own son's hands. People think betrayal comes like a storm. Loud, violent, obvious. But no. Sometimes it comes as a soft nudge across the table. A blue folder. A voice saying, "Sign it, Mom." At home, I hung my cardigan on the chair and stood still in my quiet kitchen. The clock ticked steadily. The refrigerator hummed. Everything looked the same. But nothing was the same. My son thought I wouldn't notice. He thought age made me blind. He's about to learn otherwise. When I got home from the bank, the house felt too quiet, like it was waiting for something to happen. I set my purse on the counter and sank into the chair by the window. My legs ached from the walk, but it wasn't the kind of pain you rest away. It was the kind that comes from realizing the ground under you isn't as solid as you thought. I don't know how long I sat there, but the creak of the front gate finally stirred me. Only one person opens it that gently. Jonas. He doesn't rush inside like his mother used to. He takes his time, respectful of the old hinges. Then a soft knock. "Grandma? It's me." I opened the door, and there he stood, tall, awkward, wearing that same earnest expression I always loved. 19 is a strange age, the body nearly grown, the heart still soft. "I brought you something," he said, lifting a bag. "Groceries. I passed the market." Groceries? From a boy who barely has enough for textbooks. My throat tightened. "You didn't have to, sweetheart." "I know," he grinned, "but I wanted to." He stepped into the kitchen, placing the bag on the table like it was something delicate. Fresh apples, bread, a jar of the honey he knows I like. Small things, but chosen with care, the way people choose when they aren't trying to impress or manipulate. "Are you all right?" he asked. "You look tired." I hesitated. I never wanted him to carry burdens that weren't his, but his eyes, his mother's eyes, had a way of drawing truth out of me. "I had a long morning," I said. "Bank matters." He pulled out a chair and sat, elbows on his knees. "Nothing bad, I hope." "Just things I needed to check for myself." He didn't push. That's something about Jonas. He leaves silence open, like a door you can walk through only if you want to. For a moment, we just sat there. Him tapping the table quietly, me watching the steam rise from the kettle I'd forgotten to turn off. "You know," he said, picking up an apple. "Mom used to tell me how Grandpa hated paperwork. Said it was invented to confuse decent people." That's exactly what he used to say. I smiled despite myself. He'd glare at every contract like it had insulted him personally. Jonas laughed, soft, warm, and something loosened in my chest. This boy reminded me of the days before all the disappointment settled in. He looked around the kitchen, then back at me. "Grandma, has my uncle been bothering you about anything?" Direct, unexpected, but not rude. "What makes you ask that?" "He called my mom yesterday," Jonas said. "She seemed off. And today he called me too, asking if I'd been to see you, like he was checking up on something." I blinked. Gavin hadn't spoken to Jonas in months, not unless he needed to borrow a ladder. "What did he say?" I asked. "He asked if you'd been confused lately, if I'd noticed anything strange about you." Jonas paused. I told him no, because it's not true. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Confused. That word again. Kendra had said it yesterday, too, in that gentle, dangerous tone. Jonas watched my face, then leaned forward. "Grandma, whatever's going on, you know I'm on your side, right?" His side. My side. Funny how those words feel different depending on who says them. I reached out and touched his hand. "I know, sweetheart." He didn't ask for details. Didn't try to fix anything. Just stayed a while longer, talking about school, about a professor who reminded him of his grandfather. Normal things. Kind things. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me tighter than usual. "Call me if you need anything," he said quietly. After he left, I stood at the window, watching him walk down the path. He didn't look back. Not because he didn't care, but because he trusted I was watching. And I was. When the gate clicked shut, I felt something shift inside me, A new kind of steadiness, not anger, not fear. Simply this: someone still saw me, not as a burden, not as an inconvenience, as a person. And that meant I wasn't as alone as I thought. They came back sooner than I expected. I was still finishing the dishes from lunch when I heard the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. Not the neighbor's old sedan. No, this was the sound of Gavin's too large SUV, the one he bought last year when he complained he couldn't afford to help me fix the back fence. I wiped my hands on a towel and stayed where I was. Let them knock. Some things deserve a pause, a sharp rap on the door, then another, faster, like impatience disguised as politeness. "Mom, it's us," Gavin called. Us. That meant trouble. I opened the door just wide enough. He was holding the blue folder again, only now it was thicker, swollen like something overstuffed and dishonest. Kendra stood beside him with that strained smile she wears like a mask too tight for her face. "We really need to go over this today," Gavin said, pushing the folder forward as if offering a peace treaty he didn't intend to honor. "I told you," I replied. "I'm reviewing it." "That was yesterday," he said. His voice had lost the softness entirely. "We've updated everything. It's clearer now." Clearer. They love that word when they've hidden something deeper. Kendra stepped in with her syrupy tone. "We simplified the pages, Mildred, to make it easier for you." "For me," I said, though my voice didn't rise. "How kind." She either missed the sarcasm or pretended to. "We even marked the important lines with new tabs." Indeed, they had. Bright green tabs this time. 6. No, 8. As if adding more signatures would make things clearer. "Why don't we sit?" she said, already moving toward the kitchen table. But I stayed by the doorway. Something in me refused to step aside. "We'll stand." Gavin sighed sharply. "Mom, don't make this difficult." I looked at him. Really looked. Not as a mother who yearns for the boy she raised, but as a woman evaluating the intentions of another adult. His jaw was too tight. His eyes kept shifting toward the folder like a gambler guarding his last chips. "What's changed?" I asked. Kendra blinked. "Excuse me?" "You said the papers were the same. Then you said you simplified them, but now there are more signature lines. So, which is it?" Gavin pressed his lips together. "The lawyer said we needed to include some additional forms." "What lawyer?" "Our family lawyer," Kendra answered quickly. "You don't know him." "That's convenient," I murmured. She bristled. "Mildred, this is all standard." "Standard for placing someone in long-term care?" I asked. Their silence was brief, but long enough. Kendra recovered first. "No one is putting you anywhere. It's just planning. Responsible planning." I let out a slow breath. "Planning for what?" "For the future," Gavin said. His tone was flat, impatient. "Look, these decisions need to be made now, before something happens. Before you lose track of things." There it was. The real reason, spoken aloud at last. "Lose track," I repeated. "You know what I mean," he said. "You've been forgetting things." "I forgot nothing," I replied. "Not one thing, including what you authorized from my bank account." The color drained from his face. Kendra straightened, her voice tightening. "You misunderstood." "I understood perfectly. Digital signatures under my name, recurring transfers, insurance payments for your household, care management fees, 19 months' worth." Gavin took a step toward me, folder in hand. "Mom, listen." "No," I said. "You listen." He froze. Not because I raised my voice. I didn't. I've learned in my 74 years that quiet words travel farther. You expect me to sign papers you won't explain? Papers that change every time you bring them? Papers connected to a lawyer I've never met. And you expect me to believe this is for my comfort? Kendra's cheeks flushed. We're trying to make your life easier. You're alone, Mildred. That house is too much. You shouldn't be handling things on your own. I've handled things on my own longer than either of you have been alive, I said. Gavin exhaled sharply. Mom, we need this. We need you to cooperate. There it was. Not help you, not support you. They needed something from me, something big. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. They exchanged another glance, quicker this time, anxious. Kendra stepped forward. It would delay everything. Everything, I echoed. Gavin rubbed his temples. Mom, please, stop digging into this. Sign the form so we can finalize arrangements. Arrangements. Another word they used like a blanket to hide something sharp underneath. I took the folder from his hand. Not because I intended to sign, but because I wanted him to see I wasn't afraid of it. I'll review it, I said. You said that already, Gavin snapped. And I'll say it again until I understand every line. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His foot tapped once against the floor. A tell I knew since he was 3 years old, the one he had when he was caught in a lie. Finally, he said, We'll come back tomorrow. And just like that, they left. Walking down my steps with the confidence of people who believe the matter is only temporarily delayed. I watched them go, that thick folder pressed against my chest. Tomorrow they would return. And tomorrow I would have answers they wouldn't expect. Because tomorrow, I wouldn't be reviewing these papers alone. I didn't sleep at all that night. The house creaked, the wind scratched at the gutters, and every sound felt like a reminder. They're coming back tomorrow. They would arrive with that swollen folder, with their gentle lies, with their urgency disguised as concern. I couldn't face that folder alone again. Not another time. So in the morning, after washing my face with water cold enough to wake the dead, I put on my warmest coat, slipped the folder into my bag, and walked out the door before fear could suggest I stay home. It wasn't far to the community legal clinic, just 4 blocks, though each one felt longer than the last. My breath came out in little puffs, trailing behind me like thoughts I didn't have time to catch. The clinic sat between a pawn shop and a barber that hadn't changed its sign since the 70s. The building looked tired, but the sign on the door, free legal aid for seniors, felt like a lifeline. Inside, the waiting room was quiet. A young woman at the desk offered a polite smile. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, clutching my bag, but I need someone to look at some documents. Of course. Let me check who's available. I waited, listening to a clock tick on the wall. Each tick sounded like a countdown to something I wasn't ready for. Minutes passed before a man in his late 60s stepped into the room. Tall, gray-haired, with eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and judged none of it. Ms. Whitcomb? He asked. Yes. I'm Mr. Lambert. Come with me. His office smelled faintly of old books and ink. He gestured to a chair, and I sat, pulling the folder from my bag as if it might bite. What would you like me to look at? He asked. I opened it to the first page, smoothing the creased edges. My son wants me to sign these. He says they're medical papers. Mr. Lambert's eyes flicked to the pages, then back to me, then to the folder again. Let's have a look, shall we? He adjusted his glasses and began reading. Not quickly. Not with the dismissive confidence of someone who'd already made up his mind. No. He read like a man familiar with traps. The longer he read, the stiller he became. When he finally lifted his head, something in his expression had changed. The warmth was still there, but behind it, was steel. "Ms. Whitcomb," he said carefully, "may I ask, did your son explain these documents to you?" "He explained nothing," I replied. "Just said they were routine." "They are not routine." His tone was gentle but firm, not in the slightest. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. "Tell me plainly, what are they?" He tapped the top page. "This first section grants your son durable power of attorney, full control over your finances, assets, and legal decisions." My throat tightened. He turned to the next. "This one allows him to place you in a care facility of his choosing without requiring your explicit consent at the time." My breath stilled. "The third authorizes temporary transfer of property management, which in practice means your home could be sold or refinanced without you signing a thing." He flipped to the last page, tapping the green tab. "And this final signature? It confirms that you acknowledge all of the above and waive the right to dispute decisions made on your behalf." For a moment, the room was utterly silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. I stared at the papers. Those tiny letters, those polite phrases, those clean margins, all pretending to be benign. They were wolves wearing hospital gowns. "My son said it was to make things easier," I whispered. Mr. Lambert's voice softened. "Easier for whom?" I swallowed hard. "For him." He closed the folder gently and slid it back to me. "Ms. Whitcomb, if you had signed these, you would have lost control of your home, your savings, and your freedom. All of it. You would be vulnerable. Vulnerable." The word sat heavy on my chest, but underneath the heaviness, something else began to grow. Not anger, not yet. Clarity. "What should I do?" I asked. He folded his hands. "Do not sign anything they bring you, not one page. And if they pressure you again, you come straight back here." I nodded slowly. "They're coming tomorrow." "Then tomorrow," he said, "you will be ready." When I left the clinic, the cold air hit my face like truth. I walked home with the folder clutched tight under my arm, not because I feared losing it, but because now I understood exactly what it was. Not paperwork, not planning, not help. It was a trap, set by the two people who should have protected me. But they underestimated something important. I may be 74. I may move slowly. I may forget where I put my glasses, but I do not forget who I am, and I do not go quietly. The walk home from the clinic felt longer than it should have. My legs were steady, but my mind kept replaying Mr. Lambert's voice. "You would have lost everything." Funny how a stranger can say a thing so gently, and it still hits like a blow to the ribs. When I reached my porch, I stopped with my hand on the railing. The paint was peeling in one spot. I'd been meaning to fix it for months. My husband always kept this porch spotless. I stood there for a moment, letting my fingers rest on the chipped wood. "Look at me now," I whispered to him. 74 and nearly walked into a cage I didn't see. Inside, the house felt different again, but not like yesterday. Yesterday, it felt invaded. Today, it felt like it was standing with me, waiting for my next move. I put the folder on the kitchen table, not in its old spot. No, I placed it right in the center. A wounded thing laid bare. I stared at it a long time, arms folded, kettle humming softly behind me. If I had signed once, it would have been over. A single pen stroke, and my life would have slipped into my son's hands like sand through fingers. How easily trust can be betrayed. How quietly. I made tea, but I didn't drink it. Just held the cup, letting the warmth settle into my palms. My breathing slowed. My thoughts straightened. They would come tomorrow. confident, prepared, expecting me to yield the way I always had. But something had changed. Not in them. No, they'd been like this for a long time. The change was in me. I pulled out my notebook, a small, worn thing with a cracked spine. I opened it to a clean page and started writing. Not sentences, just facts. Straight lines of truth. Recurring transfers. Insurance tied to their address. Care facility authorization hidden in paperwork. Power of attorney disguised as medical form. Refusal to explain. Urgency. Pressure. Lies. The page filled fast. I didn't need to embellish. Facts speak for themselves. When I finished, I laid my pen down and exhaled. Writing it out stripped the fog from everything. It all looked so plain, so predictable. People show you who they are long before you ever believe them. The afternoon light shifted in the window. Dust floated lazily in the beam, the way it always does. Nothing special. And yet, sitting there, I felt like a different woman than the one who woke up that morning. I wasn't scared anymore. Wary, yes, but not scared. I got up and moved around the house, touching familiar things. The frame of my daughter's picture, the dented mixing bowl from our early marriage, the clock that still loses 3 minutes a week. These things reminded me of every version of myself I had ever been. The girl who worked nights to buy her first car. The young mother who knew how to stretch a dollar. The wife who cared for a dying husband without ever once asking, "Why me?" The woman who buried half her heart when her daughter died. The grandmother who kept going anyway. A woman like that does not crumble over a folder. By 6 o'clock, the sky outside had turned a soft blue, the kind that looks almost tender. I sat back down at the table, folded the folder shut, and placed my hand on top of it. "They think I'm fragile," I said aloud. "Old. Easy to sway." The house stayed quiet, but it felt like it heard me. I've survived more storms than they've ever seen. Something untied itself in my chest, a knot I'd carried for years without even noticing, the knot of always being agreeable, accepting, grateful for scraps of kindness. It loosened all at once, and I breathed more deeply than I had in weeks. They would return tomorrow, yes, but tomorrow they wouldn't find the woman they left behind. After dinner, a simple soup I barely tasted, I washed the dishes and dried them carefully, as I always do. I set everything in its place. Order matters when life tries to become chaotic. Before bed, I took the folder one last time and slipped it into a drawer. Not hidden, just moved. Out of sight, but not out of mind. Then I turned off every light and let the house settle into darkness. I lay awake, but not in worry, in clarity. Tomorrow, when they knock, I will not tremble. Tomorrow, I will know exactly who I am. And tomorrow, they will learn it too. They arrived earlier than usual. I heard the car before I saw it. That low, expensive hum Gavin's SUV makes when it climbs my driveway. I was standing at the sink, rinsing my teacup, when the sound tightened every muscle in my back. Not from fear, from readiness. A firm knock followed, not polite, not gentle. A knock that assumed the door would open. I dried my hands slowly. Let them wait. When I opened the door, Gavin stood there with the blue folder pressed to his chest like a shield. Kendra hovered behind him, her smile stretched too wide, as if she were trying to hold something in place. Her patience or her story. "Mom," Gavin said, "we need to talk." I stepped aside just enough for them to enter. Not more. Kendra walked in first, scanning the room as though expecting to find someone else. Maybe they thought Jonas was here. Or maybe they feared a witness. "We don't have much time," she began. "The lawyer wants these forms finalized today, So we should. I raised my hand, just slightly. A small gesture, but enough to stop her mid-sentence. Sit, I said. They sat. Not because they wanted to, but because something in my voice left no room for choice. I took my seat opposite them. No cookies on the table, no tea. This wasn't a visit. This was a reckoning. Gavin tapped the folder once, then pushed it toward me. Here. Everything is updated, simplified, and clarified. You can sign at the marked tabs. Clarified, I repeated. Interesting word. Well, Kendra rushed in. After yesterday, we realized the language might have been confusing, so I wasn't confused, I said calmly. I asked direct questions. You avoided them. A flicker of irritation crossed her face before she smoothed it away. Mom, Gavin sighed, why are you making this harder than it needs to be? We're trying to help you. You're alone in this house. You need support. Professional support. There it was again. Support, the word they used when they meant control. I visited the legal clinic yesterday, I said quietly. They froze. Not dramatically, not with gasps. No, it was smaller than that. A tightening around the eyes, a shift in posture, a brief, sharp breath. You went where? Gavin asked. I had someone review the documents. Kendra's lips parted, then closed again. She looked at Gavin, waiting for him to speak first. And what exactly did they tell you? He asked, voice too controlled. I opened the folder gently, turning it so they could see their own tabs glowing bright green. That these papers would give you control over my finances, my property, my medical decisions, my home, and ultimately, my freedom. Gavin exhaled through his nose, like someone bracing for an argument. Mom, that's an exaggeration. No, I said. It's the plain truth written in small print. He leaned forward, palms on the table. You don't understand how complicated things get when people your age decline. It's better to put things in place now, before it's too late. We're trying to protect you. I didn't blink. From what? Myself? Kendra shook her head quickly. No, of course not. We just worry. You worry? I said, soft but sharp. Then why didn't you worry when the roof leaked for 3 months? When I had my episode last winter and sat alone in the emergency room? When I stopped driving and no one even noticed? Silence. For the first time, real silence. Kendra stared at her hands. Gavin stared at me, jaw tightening, a muscle twitching near his temple. I revoked the bank transfers, I added. His head jerked up. You did what? I canceled every authorization, every signature you arranged, every payment taken in my name. For a moment, his composure cracked. Not enough for an outburst. He's too controlled for that. But enough that I could see the truth underneath. This wasn't about care. This was about loss. His loss, not mine. You shouldn't have done that, he muttered. Why? I asked. Did you need the money more than I did? He looked away. That was answer enough. I closed the folder and folded my hands over it. You brought me papers that could have erased my voice from my own life. And you expected me to sign because I am old. Because I move slowly. Because you think age makes a person blind. Gavin's face tightened. That's not fair. No, I said. Fair would have been honesty. Kendra finally spoke, her voice thin. So, what happens now? I took a breath. Steady, grounded. What happens now, I said, is that I do not sign anything I don't understand. And you do not bring documents into my home without explaining them fully. Gavin opened his mouth to argue, then shut it again. His shoulders dropped. Not in acceptance, but in defeat, laced with anger. We'll talk later, he said stiffly, rising from the chair. No, I replied, standing too. We'll talk when you come with truth instead of tabs." He hesitated in the doorway, as if waiting for me to soften. Then he left. Kendra followed, offering a thin, brittle "take care" that dissolved before it reached the porch. When the door closed, I stood there for a long time, hands pressed against the cool wood. My heart wasn't shaking. My breath wasn't short. I felt steady. For the first time in years, I felt entirely my own. After they left, I didn't sit down right away. I walked through the house slowly, touching the backs of chairs, the edge of the hallway table, the frame of the mirror near the door. Not because I needed support, but because the house had become something like a witness, and I needed to feel it around me. I wasn't angry, not anymore. Something inside me had settled into a clear, steady place, a place where decisions come without trembling. So the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, I called Mr. Lambert. "I'd like to come in," I said. "Of course," he replied. "Bring your documents." I didn't bring the documents they wanted me to sign. I brought something else. My notebook with the list of facts, my will from years ago, and the savings statements I'd guarded like relics. Then I dressed carefully, not fancy, just neat, dignified. A woman who knows what she's doing. The walk to the clinic felt lighter than the day before. The sky was a pale gray, the kind that promises nothing dramatic. Perfect weather for quiet decisions. Mr. Lambert greeted me at the door. His office looked the same, calm, steady, in no rush. "I'd like to make some changes," I said, taking my seat. "To your will?" he asked. "To everything," I answered. He didn't show surprise. Good lawyers don't. He simply folded his hands and waited. So I told him. Not dramatically, just clearly. About the transfers I had canceled, about the pressure, about the papers disguised as help, about how long I had been giving things away without realizing I'd been training my own son to expect more and more of what didn't belong to him. "I want a new plan," I said finally. "One that protects me." "And your home?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "especially my home." It took time, more time than I expected. He explained every term, every clause, every implication, and I listened, not as an old woman who needs guidance, but as a person reclaiming her boundaries. Together we drafted a revocation of all existing powers of attorney, a legal notice that no financial decisions could be made on my behalf without my direct presence, a protective designation that restricted any sale or refinancing of my home, and a new inheritance structure. This last one, I took my time with. My son would expect something. My daughter had expected nothing, and she had left me a boy who visited with groceries and never asked for a cent. "I want the house placed in a living trust," I said. "For whom?" "For Jonas," I replied, steady. "With protections until he's older, and with the condition that I remain here until the end of my life." Mr. Lambert nodded slowly. "And your son?" I looked out the window. A truck passed, rumbling low. When it faded, I said, "He receives what respect he has earned." "Which is?" "Nothing," I said quietly. There was no triumph in it, no bitterness, just truth spoken aloud. By midday, the paperwork was prepared, neat, clean, unambiguous. Every line explained, every consequence clear. I signed slowly, my hand steady, my breath even. When it was done, Mr. Lambert placed the folder in front of me. Not the blue one from my son, but a plain brown one with my own name written on the tab. "You're protected now," he said. Protected. A word I hadn't felt in years. I held the folder against my chest as I walked home. Not like a shield, more like something earned. The house greeted me with its usual quiet. I set the brown folder in the center of the table. Tomorrow, or the next day, they would come again. And when they did, I wouldn't need anger or fear. I would have the truth, and the law, and myself. For the first time in a long time, that was enough. They didn't come the next day. I thought they might. Anger has a way of speeding people up. But no. Silence. A long, stretched silence, the kind that usually comes before a difficult phone call. Instead, they arrived on the third day, just after noon. I saw the SUV through the window, crawling up the drive like something reluctant to face the truth waiting inside. I didn't stand to greet them. I sat at the table with my hands folded, the brown folder resting beside me like a quiet companion. The knock came. Then the door opened before I could answer. Gavin always did assume a certain ownership of this house. "Mom," he said sharply, "we need to finish what we started." Kendra followed him in, her face pale under her makeup. She clutched that blue folder, thinner today. Perhaps they'd removed the boldest clause, or perhaps they thought I'd softened. "Let's not drag this out," Gavin said, pulling out a chair and sitting directly across from me. He set the blue folder on the table with a thud. "We simplified everything. There's nothing confusing now." I didn't look at their folder. Instead, I slid my chair in slightly, letting the quiet stretch between us. "Before we discuss anything," I said, "I want you to tell me the truth. Why the urgency? Why all this pressure?" Gavin's jaw tightened. "Because it's needed. That's why." "Needed for whom?" I asked. "For all of us," he snapped. "You're making things harder than necessary. You think we want to deal with this? We don't. But you're not getting younger, and someone has to be responsible." Responsible. A word used by people unwilling to say what they really mean. "I see," I murmured. Kendra leaned forward, her voice too bright. "We just want everything in place, Mildred, so we aren't scrambling later. Please, sign the forms. It's the sensible thing." There it was again, that well-shaped plea. Practiced, polished, empty. I reached out slowly, lifting the blue folder. Their eyes followed the motion hungrily, convinced perhaps that they'd worn me down. But instead of opening their folder, I set it gently aside and placed my hand on the brown one. "This," I said quietly, "is what I will be signing." Gavin frowned. "What is that?" "My documents," I said. "Prepared with a lawyer, in my presence." Explained line by line. Kendra shifted, color draining from her face. "Mildred, what did he convince you to do?" "Nothing," I replied. "I asked. He answered. I understood. That's all." Gavin leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "What's in it?" "Protections," I said. "For my home, for my finances, and for myself." He stared at me, confusion mixing with anger. "Protections from who?" "From anyone who would take my life out of my hands," I said. It landed between us like a stone dropped into still water. Kendra swallowed hard. "So, you're refusing?" "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "I am choosing." She sank back, hands twisting in her lap. Gavin stayed rigid, as if his body were trying to hold on to the last bit of control. "Let me see that," he said, nodding toward the brown folder. "No," I said softly. His nostrils flared. "You don't trust me." I didn't look away. "I trust your behavior. It showed me what I needed to know." For a moment, none of us moved. The refrigerator hummed. A branch brushed against the window. The house held its breath. Gavin closed his eyes, jaw pulsing. "So that's it," he muttered. "You're choosing a stranger's advice over your own family." "I'm choosing my safety," I said. my dignity, my voice. He pushed back from the table abruptly, the chair scraping across the floor. Unbelievable. Kendra stood more slowly, her eyes shining with something between fear and resentment. If anything happens, she said, don't say we didn't try to help. You didn't try to help, I answered. You tried to take over. She flinched. Gavin reached for the blue folder, stuffing it under his arm, like a defeated soldier gathers his gear. At the door, he paused, his back stiff. This isn't over, he said. For me, I replied quietly. It is. He left without another word. Kendra followed, not looking back. The door shut softly. So softly it surprised me. I sat there a long time afterward, my hand resting on the brown folder. No shaking, no doubt. Just a calm so deep, it felt like it reached all the way down to the girl I used to be. I had expected this moment to feel like a battle. Instead, it felt like finally breathing. They didn't stay away for long. I knew they wouldn't. People don't abandon what they believe they're entitled to. And my son, he believed many things about me, about this house, about what the future should look like. For him, not for me. 2 days passed in a strange stillness. No calls, no knocks, just an absence thick enough to notice. I used the time well, organizing papers, labeling folders, placing copies of everything in the drawer where I keep important things. I moved slowly, but not uncertainly. There's a difference. On the third evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across my kitchen, I heard the gate click open. Firm steps on the path. Only one set this time. Gavin. He didn't knock. He opened the door and stepped inside like a man entering his own property. Mom, he said, breath tight, we need to finish this. He held no folder, no gentle tone, no polished explanations, just a tension in his shoulders that made him look smaller, not larger. I wiped my hands on my apron, I'd been chopping vegetables, and pointed to the table. Sit. He sat, but not fully, just perched, ready to spring. His eyes went to the brown folder beside my teacup. What's in there? He asked. My decisions, I said. Decisions you made without talking to us. I tried, I said. You handed me documents you wouldn't explain. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, you're being impossible. We're trying to avoid chaos later. You think I want to handle your care, your house, your bills? I'm doing this because it has to be done. And yet, I said, it only had to be done once you could benefit from it. His eyes flashed. That's not fair. It's honest, I replied. He lowered his gaze for a moment. Not in shame, no, but in calculation. Then he looked back up. Fine. Show me what you signed. Let's go through it together. No, I said gently. I don't need to go through it with you. His mouth twitched, as if he couldn't decide whether to argue or laugh. Mom, you don't understand how this makes us look. To whom? I asked. To the neighbors? To Kendra? To your lawyer? To you, he snapped. It makes us look like villains. You're not villains, I said softly. You're just people who made choices, and I'm making mine. He stared at me then, really stared, searching my face for something. Weakness, confusion, regret. Something he could use. He found nothing. Finally, he exhaled. So that's it? You're cutting me out? I'm protecting myself, I said. You chose what you chose. I chose what I must. He leaned back, shaking his head. I can't believe this. After everything I've done for you. It was an old line. He'd used it many times in many forms. I didn't argue. I didn't list the things I'd done for him. The diapers, the late nights, the loans, the quiet sacrifices. Those things were true, but unnecessary now. I'm not measuring the past, I said. I'm protecting the present. He stood up suddenly, pushing the chair back with too much force. It scraped across the floor, startling the quiet. You're going to regret this, he said, voice sharp as winter air. Perhaps, I said, but regret is better than surrender. He went still. Maybe the words surprised him. Maybe the calm did. He'd always mistaken my silence for softness. He'd never understood that a quiet person can make decisions louder than any shout. Show me the papers, he demanded one last time. No, I said again. They're mine, not yours. He stared at me, hands clenched, jaw tight. I saw the boy he used to be, the one who threw tantrums when he didn't get what he wanted. But now the stakes were different. Higher. He wasn't losing a toy. He was losing control. He turned without another word and walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused, hand on the frame. When things fall apart, he said, don't expect me to fix them. I'm not asking you to, I replied. He left, the door shutting with a heavy thud. The kind that tries to declare an ending. But endings don't happen with slammed doors. They happen in quiet rooms, with steady breaths and choices made alone. I sat back down, resting my hand on the brown folder. No trembling, no doubt, only truth. And truth, once spoken, doesn't unspeak itself. The next morning was strangely bright. Too bright, as if the sun hadn't been told what kind of week it was stepping into. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, watching the light crawl slowly across the floorboards. The house always wakes slowly, like an old friend stretching after a long sleep. I needed that calm before whatever would come next. I didn't have to wait long. Just after 10, tires crunched on the driveway again. Not rushed this time. Slow. Controlled. I recognized the cadence. Gavin's attempt at entering a conversation he'd already lost. I didn't stand. I didn't brace myself. I simply folded my hands and watched the front door. He didn't knock. He came in like before, but he didn't move with the same confidence. There was a stiffness in his shoulders, a tightness in his jaw that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with fear. He stood across from me, not sitting this time. "Mom," he began, "we need to talk." "You've said that many times," I replied. He exhaled hard. "This isn't about the papers anymore." That, at least, was honest. "What is it about?" I asked. He hesitated. I could see him choosing his words, shaping them in his mind, polishing them in the way people do when they're about to lie or confess. I wasn't sure which way he'd lean. "People will think I did something wrong," he finally said. "If they hear you changed everything." "So this is about appearance," I said. "No," he snapped. Then softer. "It's not only that. I thought we had an understanding, that I was the one who'd handle things when the time came." "You assumed," I said gently. "Assumptions aren't promises." He looked away, hands on his hips. "I was trying, Mom. Maybe not perfectly, but I was trying." "You were trying to arrange my life without me," I said. "That isn't care. That's control." He flinched, just slightly. I could see him struggling, between anger and something else he hadn't let himself feel in years. Maybe guilt. Maybe the realization that he'd walked too far down a road he didn't know how to back out of. "Mom," he said, quieter now, "it wasn't supposed to get like this. That's because you didn't expect me to push back." He didn't argue. That, more than anything, told me he knew I was right. I leaned back in my chair. I wasn't trying to tower over him. I couldn't even if I wanted to. But there's a certain weight that comes with age and experience and survival. It fills a room without raising its voice. "You're angry," I said, "and maybe embarrassed. Those things pass. But hear me now. I won't be managed. Not by you, not by anyone. He swallowed hard. I just wanted to secure things for later. I already secured things, I said, nodding toward the brown folder. Legally, with clarity, with dignity, and without deception. His eyes followed the folder as if it were a locked door he didn't have the key to. And Jonas? He asked suddenly. Is that who you replaced me with? I didn't look away. I didn't replace you. I simply stopped pretending that being my son meant you understood what was best for me. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He just stood there, shoulders tense, mouth tight, looking somehow both older and younger than he had in years. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped. So that's it. You made your choices. I did, I said. And you made yours long before I made mine. He ran a hand through his hair. You know, I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said. But harm doesn't require intent. It only requires action. Those words stayed between us. Heavy, honest, necessary. Finally, he exhaled and stepped back. For the first time in days, he didn't try to reach for anything, not the folder, not the table, not control, just the doorknob. He paused before leaving. I don't know what you expect from me now, he said. Nothing, I replied softly. For the first time, truly nothing. He nodded once, stiff, uncertain. Then opened the door and walked out into the bright morning. When the silence returned, it didn't feel hostile or empty. It felt earned. I stayed at the table, breathing slowly, my hand resting near the brown folder but not touching it. I didn't need to. The decisions were made, the boundaries set. The storm passed. What remained was steady ground. Mine. The days after Gavin's visit moved quietly, like dust settling after a room has been shaken. Nothing dramatic happened. No slammed doors, no urgent knocks, no blue folders left like traps on my table. Just stillness. And it suited me. For the first time in a long while, I woke up without bracing myself. No tightening in my chest. No wondering what they'd demand next. The house felt lighter too, as if it finally exhaled with me. I spent a morning tending to small things I'd postponed for months, sewing a loose button on my coat, mending the hem of the curtain in the living room, wiping down the picture frames in the hallway. Quiet chores, nothing important. But I did them slowly, gently, the way you touch something you're reclaiming. It wasn't until the afternoon that the phone rang. Kendra. She didn't bother with greetings. Mildred, she said, breathless in that irritated way she gets when life refuses to bend to her plans. Gavin told me what happened. I imagine he did. This is difficult for us, she continued. You need to understand how it feels being cut out. It isn't fair. Her version of fair had always meant convenient for her. You and Gavin made choices, I said calmly. I made mine. There was a long, thin silence. Then she lowered her voice to that sugary softness she uses when she wants something. We just want to be sure you're safe, that you're taken care of. I looked around my kitchen. The sunlight on the counter, the teacup drying by the sink, the vase of flowers Jonas brought 2 days ago. Peace in small things. I am taken care of, I said. By myself, and by people who act with honesty. She didn't like that answer. I heard her breath catch. So, you're really doing this? You're really going through with all these changes? Yes, I replied. You'll regret it, she said. And the sweetness snapped, revealing the brittle metal beneath. Maybe, I said, but regret will be mine, not something handed to me under a tabbed page. She hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't take it personally. Some people break loudly when control slips through their fingers. Others break quietly, but they break all the same. As for me, I brewed tea and sat by the window, letting the afternoon sun warm my knees. A small luxury. The next day, Jonas visited. He knocked softly, as always, and stepped inside with a grocery bag swinging from his hand. "Grandma, you look different," he said. "How so?" "Lighter," he said, smiling, like someone opened a window. I smiled back. The boy had his mother's eyes, clear, earnest, never looking past me to something he wanted. We sat at the table, sharing fruit he'd brought. He told me about a project at school, something about architecture and light, how spaces feel different depending on how they're built. He spoke with his hands, animated and sincere, and I found myself thinking, yes, houses hold their stories, and people do too. After a while, his expressions softened. "Mom said Uncle Gavin's been upset." "I know." "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in a long while, things are exactly where they should be." He nodded, accepting that without needing every detail. Jonas never pushes. He leaves space for people to breathe. Before he left, he hugged me, a long, real hug, and whispered, "I'm glad you're okay." When the door closed behind him, the house felt full for a moment, not with noise, but with something better: warmth. As evening settled in, I moved through the rooms slowly. I touched the mantel where my husband's picture stood. I traced the stitches on the quilt I made after my daughter was born. I walked the length of the hallway with steady steps. This house has seen grief, yes, and strain, and loneliness. But it has also held laughter, and care, and small, stubborn kinds of love. Now it held something else, too. Something I had forgotten belonged to me. Peace. The quiet kind. The earned kind. Not a single tab or signature could take that away anymore. The morning began with soft rain tapping against the windows. A slow, steady rhythm, like someone gently reminding the world to breathe. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, listening. Rain has a way of making everything honest. Even thoughts sound clearer under it. I hadn't heard from Gavin or Kendra in nearly a week, not a message, not a knock. They had retreated into their own silence, and I let them stay there. Some distances aren't punishments. They're boundaries. And boundaries can be merciful things. I spent the morning writing small notes to myself. What to buy at the market. Who to call about repairing the gutter. A reminder to check the smoke alarm batteries. Mundane tasks. But they felt like something bigger. Proof that my days were still my own. Around noon, the gate clicked open. I knew that sound. Jonas walked up the path with careful steps, as if unwilling to disturb the wet earth. He carried nothing this time, no groceries, no books, just himself. "Grandma?" he called softly. "I'm in the kitchen," I replied. He stepped inside, shaking droplets from his hair. "I just came to see how you're doing." "I'm all right," I said. And it was true. He sat across from me, elbows on the table in that easy way of his. "Mom said things have been tense." "They were," I said, "but storms pass, even family ones." He nodded thoughtfully, as if weighing that truth. "Do you need anything? Help with bills? Shopping? Repairs?" So many offers. All simple, all sincere. He asked them without expecting a reward. "I'm managing," I said, "but thank you." He smiled a little. "I worry about you sometimes." "That's natural," I said. "But don't let worry steal your own years. You have a whole life ahead of you." He looked down, fiddling with a crumb on the table. "Uncle Gavin thinks you shut him out." "I didn't," I answered. He stepped back when he tried to step too far in. Jonas gave a quiet hum of understanding. After a moment, I reached for the brown folder on the counter. I brought it to the table, opened it, and pulled out a single key on a small ring, the key to the safe in my bedroom. I placed it in front of him. His eyes widened. "Grandma, what's this?" "A responsibility," I said. "Not a gift, and not a burden." "I don't—" I raised my hand gently. "It's not for now. Not for years. Just something to keep safe. I've put documents inside. Instructions, protections, things meant to keep you from being caught in a storm like the one I just weathered." He swallowed, emotion flickering across his face. "You trust me that much?" he whispered. "I trust your nature," I said. "And your kindness. Kindness matters more than blood, more than age, more than history." He looked at the key for a long moment, then closed his hand around it. "I won't let you down." "I know." We sat in quiet companionship for a while, listening to the rain soften against the roof. No tension, no fear, just a shared peace, rare, earned, and deeply felt. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me gently, carefully, like someone holding something precious. And when the door closed behind him, the house stayed warm. I walked through the rooms slowly. My home, my decisions, my life. Not perfect, not easy, but still mine. Fully mine. I touched the frame of my husband's photograph, then the one of my daughter. "I did all right," I murmured to them, not gracefully, but firmly. In the living room window, the rain eased into a thin mist. The world looked softer, washed clean. Maybe I did too. Growing older doesn't mean fading. Sometimes it means sharpening into someone who finally refuses to apologize for existing. I made myself a fresh cup of tea, sat down, and let the quiet settle deep. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't victorious. I was simply steady. And steady, at my age, feels like freedom.